Welcome to episode 23 of Accessible Finance, where we demystify personal financial planning topics so you leave saying, I get it now. I'm Eric Johns.
And I'm Rachel John.
Let's dive in.
All right. So, Eric, we wanted to discuss Roth IRAs.
Yes.
How are they generally perceived by just the public?
Roth IRAs, I think they're the newest, right? So they're a bit, there's some mystique there.
Yeah.
I think Roth conversions, negative perception by some, even in the planning community. They're probably over promoted, but they are certainly useful tools to have, right? So they're somewhat of the financial boogeyman, right?
Yeah.
Especially older planners, old dog new tricks type thing.
Mm-hmm.
They're newer and they're not comfortable with them, and they think they're overused, so they're going to be averse.
And the downsides, if done incorrectly,
They're pretty bad.
are massive.
Very
So
large downsides,
it can be
very
scary.
large upsides. So high risk, high reward plays. You need to know what you're doing.
Mm-hmm. And the high risk, high reward is less in the actual account itself and more just in the implementation if you're not sure what you're doing.
Right.
So I think, in order to really ensure that what we're talking about with Roths is accessible,
Okay.
because that is our name. I think we need to start with just kind of, zoom out a bit, what our three accounts are before we start drilling down into it so that,
Okay.
Viewers have a perspective as far as like what arena of this, financial world we're kind of in.
So we're going to talk about the tax status of accounts.
Mhm.
So first, a Roth IRA. What is a Roth IRA? Well, the tax status of that account is tax-free. Okay. It's after-tax dollars. You've paid tax on the dollars. You put that into a tax-free account. And now when you pull the earnings and interest out later, you're good to go. All right. You've already paid the tax. So all of the earnings, including capital gains, dividends, and interest that occur within that account are not taxable to you as they're happening. And they're also not taxable to you later down the line,
Right.
provided you've checked all the boxes.
At the end of the day, we know that like Uncle Sam always gets their money, right?
Correct. So in this way, you prepaid.
Correct.
You paid them on the front end.
You prepaid so that anything else that happens afterwards, what's yours? Uncle Sam doesn't even know it exists.
Right.
It is yours free and clear.
Okay, so that's the first bucket we're talking about is tax-free. Well, we're going kind of in reverse order.
We are, but that's okay. That's our Roth account, right? So that's
right. What is a Roth IRA? That's
right.
it.
Bucket number one, okay. Tax exempt.
Well,
Roth account, right?
Yeah, right. I was going to go into the brief. I already did there. I already went there. Brief caveat. Roth IRA is an account, not an investment. Okay. So these investments, these accounts are not unique into what investments they can hold.
That's a really good.
They can all hold the same things.
Correct.
Let's say.
Because we have interacted with clients and friends who have inquired as to like, well, what am I actually investing in when I invest in my Roth? And the answer
I've had one better than that.
Whatever you want.
I've had it. Yeah, I contributed $6,000 to my Roth. And I'm like, oh, okay, great. So what'd you invest in? And they said, I just told you, a Roth.
Yes.
And I'm like, okay, we got some work to do. Let's talk.
Correct. So there's still elections to be made once you've put it in a Roth. The only difference is the how it's handled taxably, right?
Right. Okay. So anyway, sorry for the detour.
Important.
Tax-free Roth IRA.
Okay. So bucket number one, tax-free Roth.
Bucket number two, tax deferred. Okay. That means I am not paying tax today. I'm deferring the tax until later. What that does mean though is there are no tax consequences from the actions inside of that account in the current year. What that means is interest, dividends, capital gains from buying and selling securities within a tax deferred account, no tax impact on your current year. You will be paying tax at a rate at the ordinary income, at your current ordinary income tax rate when you withdraw the funds on the exact amount of the withdrawal of funds. So nothing in there matters to you in the current year until you withdraw it. Okay.
You tell Uncle Sam, like, take a hike for now. Like, I'll see you later.
Right.
So you're seeing them at very different times, right?
Right. Exactly. So you're going to pay more in taxes, but like typically speaking, you're going to pay more in taxes. Maybe that's not a helpful way to frame it, but you will pay more tax dollars, but you might be paying it at the same or lower rates in the future. Does that make sense? So we want to pay taxes at the lowest rate. That was probably an unhelpful detour.
It was an unhelpful detour.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I blew
it. This is where an example would come in handy, which we won't get into just yet. But again, like we are trying to like zoom out real quick onto the three different types of taxabilities of accounts, right? So we've got our first one. That's our tax-free, our Roth, where we say like, hey, Sam, nice to meet you. Here's your money. All right. Like, this is mine. This whole pile's mine. If the pile grows, it's still mine and mine alone. Like, you don't get to touch
Already
it.
paid the taxes. We're good.
Correct.
We're scoring.
Your tax deferred account, you and Uncle Sam kind of shake hands and say, see you when I retire. Like, I'll see you
Yep,
later.
we'll be back and I'll
Yeah.
have more, but I'm not
Right.
paying any
But
today.
in the meantime, like, leave me alone.
Right.
Right. So Sam takes a hike for that.
Right.
The third account, right, is your taxable account, which is
You have already paid the taxes.
Yep.
Okay. And now you're going to pay the taxes as the actions occur. Okay. So they produce tax consequences to you in the current year that we're in.
And so that's going to be
So if
like your
I'm paying
brokerage
interest and
accounts,
dividends in 2024,
your checking
and I'm
account.
putting it on my 2024 tax return.
Correct.
Okay.
And
If I sell
so
stocks and I have a capital gain or capital
correct.
loss, it's hitting my return.
And so that is like your ongoing partnership with Uncle Sam.
Right.
Like
Right.
you're
You've
with
already
him
and
from
you've
jump.
already paid the taxes once, but now
Correct.
you're still going to pay the taxes on what happens with the things you pay the taxes on.
Correct. Which is just your, your checking account, your brokerage account, your
Right.
ongoing
We
like
didn't go into
monies
it, but
that you can
the
use.
tax deferred are typically your retirement
Thank you.
accounts.
Yeah.
Okay, so 401k, 403b, 457b. Oh, I did want to make the point. IRA. When we say like traditional IRA, that they're called a variety of things. I've heard that like it's been called contributory IRA, right? There's a rollover IRA, traditional IRA, and then there will be like you might hear inherited IRA, which will have marginally different treatment depending on your beneficiary status.
If you
But
look up like what kind of tax deferred accounts are there, the list is extensive.
right,
Whereas that is not true for your
no, it's
tax free or
correct.
tax.
Roth is just going to have Roth somewhere in the name. It'll be
Correct.
Roth 401k. Roth
Just
Simple
Roth.
IRA now. The Secure Act 2.0 did that,
Mhm.
or Roth IRA.
Which is why for us we try to imagine them as buckets of just like based upon how the funds in there are treated taxably. That's where we're at.
Right.
So you've got your three different buckets, and ideally, you have funds in all three different types of buckets so that you can pull from whichever one is most advantageous to you at any given time.
Right. From a tax perspective. Yes.
Correct. So once you're in that Roth bucket, that's kind of the one that we're going to be living in a bit,
All right.
right? How do you get money into that?
How do you get money into it? There are two ways. A direct contribution, which is where you just contribute to it.
Mhm.
Like you literally just go to your custodian, press move money. It'll go from your checking account or wherever you want it to go from to your Roth IRA.
And there are
Direct
limitations on how much you can
Correct.
contribute, right?
Yes, absolutely. 7,000 in 2024, I believe.
Mhm. So, you're limited if you're looking to really fill that bucket in a large and meaningful way. 7,000.
I am correct. 7,000, and then
There.
it is an extra $1,000 if you're over 50
There you go.
or
Those
50 or
catch up,
over. I'm sorry.
right? Okay.
Correct. Catch-up contribution.
Correct. So you
that's
could
a
do a
straight
direct
7,000.
contribution. Okay. What's the second way?
Conversion. All right. And that covers what's called a backdoor Roth. I'm only mentioning it because you're going to hear it heard. I'm sure you're going to hear it at some point in your life. It's going to be said by somebody. It's a smaller conversion.
Yeah.
It's just a way to get around the contribution limits, right? But you can make a direct contribution if you're single and earn less than $146,000 a year, or if you're married filing jointly earning less than $230,000 a year in 2024.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So anyway,
But we're going to be
do a
living.
direct contribution,
Correct.
or you can do a conversion. All right.
Now, most people, I think, don't really balk necessarily at the direct contributions. It's
Right.
very clear what
People
that
kind of
is.
understand. It's straightforward.
Correct.
You're just putting money from one account to another.
Exactly. Similarly, as you would too in like your 401k, it's just going into a different account. But
Right.
when we talk about conversions, that's when people start to
Right,
get
right. Because
very
as they well should,
uncomfortable.
there's a lot more to worry about.
Mhm.
Okay, there is. That's correct. So a conversion is when you're taking money that is in a tax deferred bucket or in a tax deferred account bucket, right? And then you're going to convert it into a tax free account bucket. So you're
Mhm.
going from like what I typically refer to as a traditional IRA
Mhm.
to a Roth IRA.
Yeah.
All right. And what that means is you typically are going to be paying tax the time you do it because the government's like, look, we're giving you, you're going to have no tax on this account. We've got to get our tax somewhere. And they're going to get that tax at the time you convert the
Mhm.
funds from one account type to another, right?
Mhm.
So that's typically, that's what a conversion is, and that's how it's taxed. You're going to pay ordinary income tax on the amount that you've converted.
Correct. So it's essentially as though on my tax return, I'm just reporting that I've made this much extra income.
Right.
And so
Yeah.
there are a variety of tax implications in the year that you make that conversion.
Correct.
It can bump you from one tax bracket into another. Depending on how much you're converting, it could bump you up
Yeah, you can go all the way
multiple
up. We've seen people go all the way up, right? If you convert $1 million, then everything
Mhm.
over in 2024 it's like 600,000. Everything over 600,000 is taxed at 37%. You maybe shouldn't do that, right? You might want to
Smart idea.
reconsider it.
Yeah. So I think it's important for us to really delve into when it's worth, when you should consider making a conversion, and then why having a Roth account is so beneficial.
Okay, sure. Let's real briefly talk about the comparison between a Roth IRA and a traditional IRA, right?
Okay.
Because we want to,
So we'll put
Roths are not strictly better, which means better in every circumstance. They're not. Um, what I mean is,
in
if
most.
in most. Like, sure,
In
if you could
most.
have the same amount of dollars in a Roth or traditional, you're picking Roth every day
Yeah.
because you're not going to pay taxes again. So if I have 30,000 traditional,
Correct.
30,000 in a Roth, I'm always choosing the 30,000 in the Roth because it's after
Correct.
tax money. And
Correct.
all the growth is no tax consequence.
Mhm.
And when I pull it out, it's all tax free, right?
But your time horizon is really important, right?
Correct. So like let's talk about what happens if I'm 30. All
Mhm.
right. I'm 30 and I have $100,000 to invest. All right. And then I want the money when I'm 65. If I'm in the 22% tax bracket, let's say, when I'm 30, and then in the 22% tax bracket when I'm 65, and then we're assuming the same rate of returns on the funds when I'm 30,
Mhm.
the same rate of return on the funds all throughout, and then I'm withdrawing it at 65.
Yeah.
So if I took the, like, what did we say, 100,000? So if I just contributed the 100,000 to a traditional,
Right.
right?
Because it's not taxed yet.
Or the 78,000, we just took 100,000 and subtracted
Because
the
I've paid my
22% tax
taxes
rate,
on the front end.
right?
Right.
So just 100,000 minus 22,000, we're going with 78,000 into a Roth. When I look at my after-tax dollars after 35 years, they should be exactly the same.
Correct.
My after-tax dollars are exactly the same. Okay.
And if for some reason, not this is not
Sorry.
realistic to happen, but it is an important comparison tool to say that if your tax bracket remains steady, your returns remain steady, it shouldn't matter when you're paying the taxes because you're still paying the same percentage on the same dollar,
Right.
right? Um, if that was to be the case, and we would view it as like a tie, there are two important tiebreakers, I think, that are important
Correct.
to get into a little bit.
Correct. Roth IRAs do not have what are called RMDs or required minimum distributions. That is in a traditional IRA or any of those account types, like we said, contributory, whatever, that are, I'm sorry, in the tax deferred bucket. I like to flip
That
the pin.
pen drives
It's
me
fun. It's fun.
crazy.
It's fun to flip it. It's just it's a good thing to do. So it's nice. It's a little stress reliever.
Okay,
Anyway, sorry.
back to RMDs, which
Right.
means required minimum
Right. The
distributions.
government wants
Remember,
its money.
we're not friends with. Uncle Sam is just a
Yeah.
very important part in our lives.
Right. In your
And
tax deferred
so
accounts.
in that tax deferred account, you told him earlier, like, hey, bud, like, leave me alone for now. I'll see you in a bit.
Yeah, well, this is a bit.
He's
He
going to
said
make sure he
73 is
finds you.
enough of a bit. You're
Yeah.
starting to give me my money back. Okay. So you're gonna have to pay with what are called RMDs. They take it's done on an actuarial table. It increases with age, right? Until you die. You're gonna be forced to withdraw some money so that you have to pay taxes on it,
Yeah.
and the government can take some of that, right?
Yes.
They won't all.
So you can't just have it sit there forever and be like, peace.
Yeah.
So,
So either you're going to pay throughout your lifetime, or when your beneficiaries or your heirs get those accounts, they're going to pay. So
mhm,
somebody's going to pay tax on a tax deferred account. It's just not today, right? That's
correct.
the idea. Anyway, so Roth IRAs have no RMDs or required minimum distributions, right? And then they're tax free to your heirs. Does that make sense? So I mean, they're tax free to you. They're also tax free to your heirs. And typically, right now, with the current the current um, inherited IRA rules, your heirs are gonna have 10 years to
Mhm,
withdraw the money,
mhm,
right? So for Roth IRAs, they don't have to withdraw them. They can just wait 10 years and then take all of the dollars out.
correct. And again, the reason that they have the 10-year rule is again so that Uncle Sam can continue to get all of his money on those tax deferred accounts. So
Right.
if for some reason you found yourself in a situation where we could, magically know that your tax brackets are going to stay the same and that your returns are going to stay the same, those two things would be important tiebreakers for why you would still opt for the Roth and over, um, a traditional IRA.
Mm.
There are though some caveat, like there are some select situations, I think, where the traditional IRA would be preferable to the Roth.
Mhm. Sure, sure. we're talking if we're in a large bracket, like if we're in a high tax bracket, we're not so much talking about contributions here, but there are times where you would just want to avoid a conversion,
Yes.
right? We've done podcasts on when you should contribute, whether you should contribute to a traditional or a Roth, and what that decision framework
Correct.
looks like.
Correct.
Um, but you're not going to want to convert if you're in an already very, very high tax bracket unless you have another reason for doing so. And
Mhm.
another reason, I mean, it's like very specific circumstances. Maybe we don't need to get into it, but it's typically the exception to the rule.
Yes.
Okay. You're
Or
gonna
Uncle Sam to come and find us when our tax bracket
right.
is
So I think
the limit.
when we talk about what is a Roth conversion, that's literally when you're taking assets that are in one account and just converting them to another account. So you're just converting essentially one account type to another. You can keep the
Correct.
assets the same. That's fine. Or you could sell them in the accounts with no tax consequence
Mhm.
anyway. Remember, we said that tax deferred and tax free have no current year tax consequence from the actions inside the accounts.
And in doing so, in doing that conversion, you're basically saying, like, hey, Sam, like, I told you that I didn't want to see you for like 30 years or whatever,
Yeah, but I'm here
but
early, and here's your
yeah,
money.
but here's some stuff like, come and get it early. Like,
Right.
I mean,
I'm here with your money. Right
exactly.
now,
Yeah.
I don't want to. I don't want to pay you again. I'll pay you today.
Correct.
Yeah. So that's what it is. And logistically, if you're thinking like, okay, that all sounds great, but how would I do this? You literally will just go to move money with your custodian. So Schwab, Fidelity, Vanguard. If you're, listening to this, not working with an advisor, then that's probably where you're custodying.
Yeah. It's
Anyway,
very easy to do.
it's incredibly easy to do, right? And there will be some large red box that says, "Are you sure you want to do this and not withhold taxes?" Because
It's scarily easy to do.
correct. And then we want to talk marginally, just real quickly, when they give you that huge red box that says,
Yeah.
"Are you sure you don't want to withhold taxes?" Maybe you should consider withholding taxes, especially if you're under 59 and a half. You should probably not withhold taxes. Why is that? Because if you withhold taxes, it's treated as a distribution from your tax deferred account, and you will incur, well, you might incur penalties if you're under 59 and a half,
Right.
or you don't check another one of the
They treat
boxes.
it as though you've gotten an early
It's just like you ripped money out of your
withdrawal
traditional
from your
IRA.
exactly. They think you've taken your retirement early because that's what they're trying to pull their
Because
taxes
essentially you
from.
did. You
Right.
took your retirement
You
early and
said,
handed it to the
please,
federal government.
right. You said pay taxes with my retirement account. If you
Right.
say no, please don't withhold taxes, then you have the option to pay the taxes with
With
your
other
taxable
funds,
account.
other
Right.
dollars in your taxable accounts.
Correct.
Exactly correct. Exactly correct. Okay. So that's what it is. All right. You're just going to press move money and you're just going to go from traditional IRA to Roth IRA.
Correct.
That's it. It's not a particularly complex transaction. All right. That's what it is. When do people usually do it? Right. And this will kind of hit on why. So when and why would you do this, right? You would do it broadly speaking, in a year where you want your income to be higher. Why would I ever want my taxable income to be higher? Well, we want to pay taxes at the lowest rates possible throughout our life. We're not looking to pay the least amount of taxes, right? Like
Mhm.
that's not really what we're min-maxing for. We want the lowest rates possible. Okay. So what that means is if you're in the 12% bracket, for example, or maybe even 22% bracket, and either you or your heirs have an expectation of being in a higher bracket than the 12 or 22%. Maybe your heirs are very high earners. Maybe they're CEOs. Maybe they're in the 37% bracket. You should probably be willing to pay tax on the 22% so that they don't have to pay it on 37%.
Mhm.
And there's some considerations and some values discussions to be had there.
Yeah.
Maybe you're like, you know what, they should pay the taxes. I don't want to
Yeah.
pay their taxes. Let them pay the
Maybe
taxes.
just like
Okay.
them.
Yeah, maybe you don't like them and it's not even going there. Sure.
I would say the majority, if not all of the people that we work with, though, are very interested in making sure that the funds that are part of
Yeah.
their family remain in legacy, and they would much rather see the funds go towards their heirs than to Uncle Sam. So,
They want to make smart decisions with money,
correct. And um,
both for them and for their children,
correct.
right? That's typically how it works. And I mean that's kind of what we would do, right? So that tracks.
Yeah.
All right. So
Exactly.
so we said broadly speaking, when you want to realize more income, well, what is that? Maybe you take a sabbatical, right? And so you went from making, I don't know, 150, 200K a year. Now you're looking at zero or
Yeah.
whatever's produced in your taxable accounts. Because if you're taking a sabbatical, you probably aren't doing it with $0.
Correct.
So you're going to have some money in a checking or savings. It's going to produce some income, but maybe it's only 10K.
Yeah.
All
And
right.
it's important to note, I think, that like you're artificially raising your tax bracket now to ensure that you're lowering it later because
Right.
you're not having to pay taxes when Uncle Sam decides to tell you you have to pay taxes
Correct.
through those required minimum distributions. So if you're like, look, you get to determine when to somebody else.
Right. It's tax planning. Again, we want to pay taxes when our rates are the lowest,
Mhm.
right? Or our brackets are the lowest. Okay. So you might do the most common time? When is the most common time that individuals execute a Roth conversion strategy? And notice that I said strategy there because it's not just a Roth conversion. Typically, it's not a one and done thing.
Yes.
All right. When might it be a one and done thing? Widower penalty.
Yeah.
To avoid the widower
Yeah.
penalty. That's when you're unfortunately elderly couple, a spouse dies, your
Yep.
spouse dies, right? So now there's one individual. Instead of marrying filing jointly, now we're
Mhm.
filing single. Okay. And you have to do it the very next year,
Yes. The
unless
time
you have a qualifying dependent living with you.
Correct. The time horizon on something like that is very, very short. And so you go from being able to be in a one tax bracket to having all of those benefits essentially cut in half.
Yeah, your tax
So
brackets are halved.
your income's probably in this similar ballpark or what
It
you're
might be identical, right?
exactly. But your tax bracket is now twice as high as it was before.
Chances are you're retired, you have the RMDs, and now you're going to get hit with a higher bracket. So, look, if you might have been married filing jointly, you might be in the 12% or 22% bracket.
Mhm.
But now that your spouse is deceased,
It
you
jumped up
might
to
instantly be kicked
24.
up to 24, yeah,
Yeah.
32. Like,
It's
it might move.
it's suddenly very, very high. And then once it's that high, it's not like it's going down. You're there and you're going to stay there. And then when RMDs kick in, you're going to continue living there, if not increasing from there.
Right. So, you might want a larger conversion in that
Correct.
year.
So in that
But
situation, rather than having it kind of process, like you were saying, rather than having it be a strategy over multiple years, you're probably looking at one large conversion and just accepting that you're just gonna kind of pay all those taxes at one lump sum.
right. Right.
But
So
ultimately,
the
the ideal, yeah,
most common will be an individual retires or stops work. Maybe they retire at 62. RMDs are not going to happen until 73, okay, with Secure Act 2.0, okay? So you've got 11 years there between 62 and 73 to where you can start increasing your taxable income might be quite low. You might have a lot of money in a taxable brokerage, right? And then you might typically what happens for Americans, okay? We stuff a ton of money into our active retirement plans,
mhm,
which are almost always tax deferred. They can be Roth, but people kind of typically again are confused. And if they're current retirees, Roth probably were very foreign to them or weren't around until they were in their 50s and they were just kind of like, nah, I don't know about this new stuff.
it's
Right.
true
We don't know how long this is gonna stick around. They might revert it. We're not in it.
for sure.
So anyway, large amounts of tax deferred balances usually have some sizable brokerage balances, which just means just taxable accounts. So they might have 500K in a taxable, 3 million in tax deferred, zero in Roth. Okay. That happens a lot.
Yep.
So they might want over time to execute like a series of Roth conversions over their years while they live on those. They use that 500K
Yep.
and the income and the income generated from that $500,000,
Correct. Your
whether it be
dividends
capital
or
gains,
yeah.
dividends, or interest.
Yep.
They're going to live on that 500,000 and they'll pay the tax on the Roth conversion from that 500,000, right? And then we'll start converting some of that 3 million so
Correct.
that when our RMDs do start hitting, they're not hitting us for like 150K,
Correct.
right? We don't want to get just grilled with these RMDs.
Mhm.
All right.
It's just it gives you a bit more control over being able to hone in on how much money you're getting based upon how much money you need,
Right.
rather than artificially having to realize income when you don't need to.
Mhm.
So there are huge upsides to doing it. But as we've discussed, there can be massive downsides if done
You
incorrectly.
can blow yourself up.
Yeah,
You
we've
can,
seen it.
right? So you don't want to do that. It's a tool to
Mhm,
utilize, but again, the downsides are real. Be
mhm.
careful. But yeah, most common, you'll do it over the course of those 11 years. You
Correct.
won't just you might agree to convert to the top of the 22% bracket each year
Mhm.
for 11 years. And maybe that's only converting like, I don't know, two, $300,000. Okay. Well, it's better than zero.
Yeah,
Because
correct.
like if you take nothing else away, note that most financial planners and tax planners, really all I would say all, should be advising you in such a way that you're trying to minimize your tax brackets or the percentage of tax paid on your income over the course of your lifetime. Does that make sense?
Correct.
That's what you're solving for.
Like if
That's the
on the
equation they're
last
trying to
day that
solve.
you're on Earth, you're able to retroactively look and say, like, what percentage of my income did I pay in taxes? Or what percentage of my, like, I don't know, worth did I pay in taxes? You should be able to feel as though you've had somebody in your corner if you're working with professional to make sure that that number is as low as it could possibly be.
Right. It's lifetime taxes that we're talking about,
Correct.
not like current year. We're not trying to
Correct.
stay in the
There
20%
will be
bracket.
years,
We actually don't want to have years where we have zero taxes paid. We
right,
want to fill up the 10 and 12%
those lower
brackets
ones, take
for
advantage of
sure.
them while they're
Almost
there.
always
So
fill up
you're
the
not in like
12% bracket.
the 40.
I haven't yet to meet anyone that I've told, no, 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 let's stay in the 12% bracket. Let's not fill it up.
Yeah,
Let's leave some space at the top there. Almost never.
correct.
You're always going to want a capital gain harvest, Roth convert, something like that.
And the idea is really to work with somebody that will make recommendations for you, various recommendations. But meet you kind of at a level that you're comfortable at as well. So, what we like to do if we're working with somebody on a Roth conversion is say, okay, here are different hypotheticals, here are different scenarios. Are If we converted this much, this is what your tax analysis would look like. This is what it will look like moving into the future. These are what your RMDs might look like when you get there. If you convert this second amount, this is what that would look like. And so we may give 3 or 4 different scenarios to a client, discuss the pros and cons, and then make sure that they're comfortable with the decision that they're making and that we've already have a plan in place to fund the taxes for that conversion.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
So very important.
That's great. That's fantastic.
It is.
Alrighty, guys. Well, thanks for listening. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please follow and review the show. And if you have any topics you would like discussed or financial problems you'd like solved,
Yeah.
go ahead and email us at podcast@equilibriumfp.com or visit the website equilibriumfp.com.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Till next time.